Greetings, fellow stressed out teachers of YouTube. Dr. Edel here to try talking you through one of life's greatest mysteries. How do you get good participation from your students in class? So first, I want to talk about why traditional participation methods don't really work very well. So when I was in college, the standard participation grade came from how much I, as a student, talked in class in front of my peers. And for some classes, this was easy. For literary theory, it sucked. Okay, this was a class I was very tired. I had a lot of trouble reading and understanding the material. That was the book where I would actually walk around my dorm room holding the book open in my hands to prevent myself from falling asleep while reading it. So you can imagine just how little I remembered from this book. And so my participation grade in that class was not great. You know, I did fine in the course, I managed to pass, but there was no chance in heck I was going to be talking about my thoughts on the readings in front of my classmates because I simply didn't understand the material well enough and I did not feel confident expressing that. And so in that traditional model, a couple problems there. First, you're asking students to talk about things that they barely understand or they're just learning for the first time, and to do this in front of their peers. And what ends up happening is that the students who already know the material will feel confident, and the students who just love to talk will feel confident, and you'll have a couple groups of students who simply aren't able to speak. All right, anyone who happens to be shy or a little more reserved or who likes to think through things carefully before speaking up, they're going to have a lot of trouble saying anything. Some students have high anxiety, and what this traditional model does is ramp up that anxiety to a ridiculous degree. You're basically asking a student to feel ignorant and then share that ignorance with an entire class of their peers. And so that is not going to go well. The other problem too is that you've got the students who are going to dominate the conversation, you're going to have the students who don't feel comfortable taking part, and then you have the fact that your class time is very limited. So say you're teaching a 50-minute class, 75-minute class. Even if you have a small group of students, if you have a small seminar of like 8 students, that doesn't give a lot of time for every student to talk if the discussion is classroom-wide. Now, if you're teaching an English 101 or a 102 like I normally do, and say you have 18 to 22 students in your class, then there's barely time for anyone to get a word in. There's maybe time for 5 or 6 students to say much because those are going to be my confident students. The less confident students who feel fine talking, they might say 1 or 2 things, but at least a third of my class will not feel comfortable speaking and will not say anything at all. So if I did a traditional participation grade model, right off the bat, I would be giving zeros to about 30% of my students. And to me, that's not a failing on the students. That's a failing on pedagogy if I chose to go that route. So here's what I recommend doing instead. And the first thing I want to point out is you want to maximize the use of your time in class. If you have a class of 20, as I normally do, and all 20 sets of ears are listening to just one student talk, all right? That's 19 other students who aren't engaged in that moment. So what I recommend doing is make sure you have group discussions in your class. Groups of 3 and 4, they work great. You can even go up to groups of 5. When you have those smaller groups, then instead of having one 50-minute class where you're trying to get all 20 people to try to say something. Instead, you have a 50-minute class with these small groups of 4, and there's plenty for 4 people to talk about in 50 minutes. Now, to make that work though, you really have to help students build trust. And so one of the first things I do pretty much every day is I have my students get in their groups and then talk with each other about how the week is going, how the semester is going, what are their weekend plans. It only takes about 5 minutes or so, but it gives them that personal connection so that they can get to understand that they're not alone in this classroom. Another thing I often do is I will tell them, all right guys, I want you to share with each other what was the thing you hated the most about the homework, or what was the part of the reading you just didn't like. And students always have things they won't like about the homework. It's the nature of homework. It's the nature of the reading. And when they get to share that with each other and they get to see that they are not alone in their frustrations, in their their feelings of what is this topic we are studying, they feel more comfortable talking about it as a group. Especially once they've seen that I as a teacher have opened up this topic of saying, hey, I know you're not going to like everything about these readings. I know it's going to be tough. And I do know that. I was a student. I've suffered through these things myself. Now, the next thing I like to do is I have my students rotate their groups. And so every week or two, I will have them count off and just switch up what groups they're in. The goal here is that within the first 5 to 6 weeks of the semester, every student will have met every other classmate in that room. This I feel is very important because when you do have those larger discussions, or those days when I need to give a lecture and I'm inviting questions and comments from the group, it helps if every student knows that they can trust everyone else in that room. It helps if the students can say, okay, I've talked with all these folks over here. I know they're struggling with this same thing, so they won't mind if I ask a question. Whereas if you have your students only doing the large, big room discussion, what ends up happening is you'll have 20 individuals, and individuals who have points of confusion, if they feel like they are alone in that confusion, they won't speak up. They don't want to draw that attention to themselves. But if you have groups of students, and these groups know, like, oh hey, I'm not the only one confused here, they're going to feel more comfortable speaking up and letting me as a teacher know that there's a confusion and being open with that in front of their classmates. Now, one thing to make sure of is with a small group model, don't take it to the extreme where you are expecting your students to teach each other the material. All right? That is not a good place to be in a classroom. All right? The students are in the classroom to learn from you as the teacher. They are there to learn from the homework, from the material. The group activities are not designed to replace the teaching. All right? The group activities are designed to help the students understand how they individually need to work. What work habits do they need? What time management habits do they need to develop? What shared struggles are they experiencing? And so I will often have them, lay out kind of their study schedules in their groups. I will often have them talk through, their questions to bring up to the larger class in their groups. But this next part is very important, and what I'll do is I will go around the entire room and I'll go group to group and meet with each group individually. And so, throughout, say, 20 minutes or so, I will have these small groups talking, and I'll be spending about 5 minutes with each of 4 groups. And what that allows me to do is I get to talk with each student individually. Now, they're part of that group when I'm talking with them, but I get to sit there with them right across the table. I get to see their expressions. I get to converse with them. I tell a couple terrible jokes to break the ice. But the most important thing is I will individually ask each student to give me an update of kind of where they're at with their projects or what they thought of the homework. When I go to that group, what I'm doing is giving them a quick question of my own for them. Maybe 1 or 2 students will give me an answer, and then I'll turn it to the others and say, hey, what do you think? Hey, what do you think? And this is an excellent opportunity to get to know your students. This is essentially giving me a chance to talk with each student one-on-one, even if it's only 1 or 2 minutes per student. That connection happens every day that they're in class. And so they get to know me better, and I get to know them. I get to put faces to the names. I get to hear them describe their projects, and I can put personalities to the papers that I am receiving through email or in Canvas. Now, another thing that's very important here is you need to learn your students' names. And I laugh because I have a very, very bad memory. I struggle with this. I wrote 150 pages of my dissertation and then forgot the fact that I had written them. That is a story for another day. And so here's a trick I use, and I am open with my students about the fact that I use this trick. I will send a sign-up sheet around at the start of the group conversations, and the sign-up sheet is basically a seating chart. And so by the time that sign-up sheet gets back to me, I have a list of names in order of where my students are sitting. And so I will go to my students, and I will use that chart to talk with them, each person by name. And I will joke with them. I will like cover up the names, like, all right, how many names have I forgotten today? And because I'm talking with them individually, because I am matching up their faces to their projects, they understand that I'm having trouble remembering names. They understand that I am still trying. I am making sure that I get to know them individually. And so that even though I need that crutch of that piece of paper, they get that visual and verbal reinforcement that I'm actually there for each of them individually, rather than just being there to like play the teacher. I'm not just there to give them a lecture. I'm actually there to guide them through their projects, to kind of coach them through these research papers. And I feel this is really important for a writing class, especially because the kinds of work I'm asking them to do might be very personal. Many students choose to write about their own lives, or they choose to do deeper research into topics that hit very close to home for them. And they need that sense of trust to know that I actually care about them as individuals rather than simply as names on a roster. So with that, I hope these tips are helpful for you. Please post your thoughts and questions in the comments, and I'm especially interested in if you have any tips of your own to keep student engagement in the classroom. These days it is really hard, especially since we still have these lingering after effects of the COVID lockdowns. So anything you use to build student engagement, please post those in the comments. And with that, I'm going to sign out, and Wish you guys a good rest of the day, evening, afternoon, or wherever you happen to be. So, catch you later.